Namaste, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Everest Base Camp 101. Embark has been running adventures at Everest Base Camp for more than 15 years, and tonight we're going to spend about 20 minutes an overview of what you can expect trekking to Everest Base Camp. Let's get started. If you have any questions, please reach out to me at donovan@embarkexplorationco.com. So I always like to start with a few pictures of the trek to Everest Base Camp with a few of the images that you can expect on your way there. Here's one of the images that's walking between, I think, Dingboche and Loboche. And as you can see, some very huge mountains along the way. And you can see the trekkers here near the base and some of the tea houses in the background. And even another shot as you're getting closer to Everest Base Camp, and again, some of the many mountains that are in the Khumbu region. So as I mentioned, we've been organizing treks for more than 15 years. We usually organize 100 to 150, 200 people per year, depending upon the scenario. We have a high success rate. We do 2 days in Namche, we do 2 days in Dingboche. We make sure that you're acclimatized before you get to the summit. Tonight's discussion is about trekking to Everest Base Camp. It is not about climbing Mount Everest. So I want to be really, really clear. This is trekking to the starting point of climbing Mount Everest, but not climbing Mount Everest. So if there's something you want to take away, this is the main slide tonight, right? So looking at this, you generally need about 17 days in the country, 16 nights, okay? So typically you fly into Kathmandu, usually on a Sunday, we like, and you're gonna spend 2 days, your arrival day and the second day. And on the second day there, you're going to do a gear check, you're gonna meet with the guides, you're gonna do a little city tour to see Kathmandu, it's worth it. And then the following day, you're gonna fly up to 9,300 feet to the town of Lukla. Looking at the rest of this, you can see we spend 8 days going up. Out of those 8 days, we have 2 rest days where we stay in the same place twice. You get up to Everest Base Camp at over 17,600 feet. You're going to be there. You're going to go up to Kalapatar the following morning, which is the highest point, over 18,500 feet. Then you're going to spend 4 days coming back down, 1 or 2 days at Kathmandu on the back end. We like to have a few extra days in Kathmandu on the back in case we have any weather issues on the trek. So again, kind of conceptually looking at it, 17 days, when you count flying and things from the United States and coming back, you're pretty close to 20 days, 21 days of being out. So when you're planning for this trip, you pretty much need 3 weeks off of work. There's not any other way around it without compromising the ability to acclimatize. So if there's one slide you want to take away, it's this one. So let's start the flight up to Kathmandu. So this is what it looks like as you're flying up into the Himalayas. This is one of the planes that you're going to fly in as you make your kind of way up there. Here is the town of Lukla. Some people say, oh, we saw this on National Geographic. It's the world's most dangerous airport. That's what they say. As you can see, it's a small type of runway. There's a big drop at the edge, and there's this wall on this side of the runway, and you're typically landing at 20 or 30 degree angle. So the reason this makes it the world's most dangerous airport is because there's lots of bad weather that can exist here. However, thousands of people fly up here every year, fly here and fly back. It's a short flight from Kathmandu, but this is the starting point, Lukla, the starting point of the trek. It's very, very important, and it's a fun place to fly into. Here's a group just a few weeks ago on their trek, are getting ready. They're flying up to Lukla. So as you can see on the flight, it only holds, I think, 16 people or so as they're making their flight up to the starting point of their trek. When you get to Lukla, it's where the porters are organized. It's sometimes where we send the assistant guide in advance to get everyone organized before you arrive to start your adventure. So here's a starting point to the trek. You're walking through this town. It's a kind of a busy, cute little town with lots going on. People leaving their Everest trek, coming on their Everest trek, people going to climb other mountains in the area. As you can see in the front here, we have 2 We have porters, and if you've done any of our other adventures, maybe on Kilimanjaro, you can see the porters here, each carrying 2 bags a little bit differently. And those bags have much less weight than some of your other treks that you've been on. So we'll discuss that in more detail later. So let's go over some kind of core questions we have about trekking to Everest Base Camp. When is the trekking season? Okay, that's very, very important. The trekking season on the Everest Base Camp trek is 2 seasons. One is kind of March through April, and one is mid-September to December. So about 5 months out of the year, you're going to see more people climbing Mount Everest in the April season. You'll probably see more trekkers in October. In the secondary season, the fall season. But generally, these are the timeframes that people come to trek in Nepal with the best weather. The months you generally don't want to be in Nepal are kind of mid-May through August. That's the monsoon. So that's when it's rainy, the worst weather. So most people come in the spring and the fall. You can come in, December, January, February if you want, but the best weather is a March through April and mid-September through December. So let's do an overview of the climb. On a trek to Everest Base Camp, we don't really camp anymore. We stay in what are called tea houses. So we stay in villages each night. It's a fully supported expedition style trip. So your gear is carried for you. You just hike with a day pack. On average, 1,000 to 2,000 feet of elevation gain, 6 to 8 hours of hiking at elevation per day. Some days less, some days more, but in general, that's what it's going to look like. I'm going to show you a quick video here of our intro to what it's like trekking to Everest Base Camp with Embark.
Everest Base Camp is less a destination than a state of mind. Verdant, chaotic, and wonderful. It's at the foot of the notorious Khumbu Icefall, the place at which all climbs of Mount Everest from the Nepal side begin. Embark relies on a carefully selected group of local guides to support these treks. We rely on their local knowledge to move our people back safely to Kathmandu. An Embark trek to Everest Base Camp is going to be an opportunity for a guest to experience considerable physical exertion, soaring snow-covered peaks, the likes of which you'll see nowhere else in the world. It's going to be a close encounter with the Sherpa people of the high Himal. Embark will get you there. It'll stretch the trekker's imagination, mind, and hamstrings.
So the key takeaway with that is the last sentence, which was it will stretch the trekker's imagination, mind, and hamstrings. And so that is really true with this adventure. It's a lot of time there. It's a lot of work to get there, but you'll absolutely enjoy it. So very, very important quote and very, very true. So how hard is it? It is very hard. It is a hard trek. And we're going to debate a little bit later on if it's harder than Kilimanjaro, because a lot of people who do our Kilimanjaro treks end up doing the Everest Base Camp, and which is harder. And you'll see that toward the end of the presentation. So it's about 38 miles in each direction. And there's a caveat in that, but you're hiking close to 8 miles. 2 of those days, the rest days that we're talking about, we're going to do acclimatization hikes. So realistically, you're going to be trekking more than 90 miles. Some people even occasionally hit 100 miles on this trek. So when you put it all together, that's what it's going to be. So you must train and be in very good physical shape. So a lot of distance for those of you who have climbed Kilimanjaro. This is double the distance of Kilimanjaro. So as you can see, this is a picture kind of from Everest Base Camp. And if you look at that lenticular in the back left-hand corner of your screen, that's technically where Everest is. This is Druba and Carrie doing a great jump. One of my favorite pictures ever of the area. So is it technical? No, this is a trek, right? So there's nothing technical. There's no ice axe, no crampons, no ropes. This is a hike, right? So it's just a hike. So you have nothing to worry about as long as you have the gear and as long as you are in shape, you can do this trek. What I like about this trek is there's a lot to it. There's different cultures, there's different areas, there's landscapes, there's different mountains, but here's a, maybe one of the technical pieces of it. You get across some suspension bridges near the beginning of the trek. So it makes it really magical. And here's another view of one of those or two of those suspension bridges, one of which you cross on your way, making your way up to Namche Bazaar, which is one of the largest villages in the Khumbu region. And here's one of our trekkers just actually a few weeks ago walking across that suspension bridge on day 2 of that adventure. So looking at the Everest Base Camp trek, we're going to look here at this map right here. And as you can see in the bottom, you see the flight from Kathmandu to Lukla. And we're going to kind of follow the line up the right-hand side of the screen. So starting at Lukla, walking to Phakding, as you notice, there's actually a decrease in elevation to get to that. We're going to go up to Namche at 11,287 feet. We're going to be there for 2 days. Then we're going to go to Tengboche, right? That's the monastery that some of you know. Then we're going to actually skip Tengboche. We'll go up to Fariche, which is also Dingboche. It's another place where we'd spend 2 nights. Finally, Loboche, up to Gorkshep. Gorkshep is the last village before you go to Everest Base Camp. You're going to hike up to Everest Base Camp, come back to Gorkshep, go up to Kalapatar. That's the high point of the trip, right? And then you're going to make your way all the way back down, coming back down. So the other line on the other side of the screen is another way to go to Everest Base Camp, a little bit more advanced route for some people that are out there. So one of the best parts about trekking to Everest Base Camp is the culture, right? Here's Tengboche. Here's one of the monasteries that has a bunch of monks that live up here. That a lot of times you can go in and you can go into the monastery at certain times. You can get blessings and things like that. But what makes this adventure very cool is there's lots of culture that is part of the adventure, making your way to Everest Base Camp. And we have lots of stupas as well. So a lot of culture, a lot of villages where people are working and living there throughout the year. This is the biggest village in the Khumbu region. Looking back down, this is Namche Bazaar, and this is actually one of the acclimatization hikes that you're going to do, making your way up to Everest Base Camp, but spending, again, 2 nights here. This is over 11,000 feet, but again, important to acclimatize, making your way up the mountain. And here's a group, again, just a few weeks ago, where we had a group of 5 and a group of 7, 2 separate groups on their trek, going up and just enjoying some of the views as the higher you get up on the mountain. So what do you carry on Everest Base Camp trek? You carry a day pack, and in that day pack you're going to have your rain gear, and you are going to have water and maybe some snacks. We employ porters, so here's some of our porters and some of our guides up on the trek, but the porters will carry your gear up the mountain. Sometimes in the past we've used yaks and gokyo, but in this scenario, most of the time we just use porters in this area. So on this adventure right here, you can bring 20 pounds sleeping bag and all your gear in a typical duffel bag, which is like an extra large or a large North Face duffel. And you can have 10 pounds in your day pack. So only 22 pounds that you can carry. Don't need a sleeping pad, like some of our other trips. We have the sleeping pads there, but you need to be able to put all your gear in one bag. 10 pounds you can carry in your day pack. So here's a typical gear list. And again, reach out, email us if you even wanted to see a copy of this. But as you can kind of imagine, we have synthetic shirts, t-shirts. It's kind of 2 pairs of everything pretty much, obviously with the exception of socks and underwear. But all of this gear must be under 22 pounds. Trekking poles, headlamps, fleece, balaclava, sun hat, those kind of things you need. So where do you sleep? You sleep in tea houses. Tea houses are kind of like hotels, and they exist all the way up, and that's where you're also going to eat each day: breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the trek. So here is looking down at one of the tea houses almost near Everest Base Camp. Looking back down, and you can see this is a small, tiny little village. And let's look a little bit closer. So here's a bigger actually sized tea house that exists, but as you can see, lots of different rooms. Sometimes the room have bathrooms, mostly they don't. They tend to be sparser, or they tend to be smaller and not as nice as the further you get up on the trek to Everest Base Camp. So they started a little bit nicer, and then they're not. But here's what maybe a room would look like. There's some better and some worse, but you have 2 beds, you have a sleeping pad. You can put your duffels in the middle. There's 2 people in it. And again, this is where you're going to sleep each night. So it's, not sleeping on the ground, but sometimes the walls can be pretty thin as well. Here is actually what it looks like a lot of times when you eat lunch, when the sun is out, you can sit outside. Here's a tea house as well with rooms above. But this is kind of what it looks like. And this, again, you're going to eat a lunch here. You might be staying here as well and eating breakfast and dinner too. Here's what the inside of some of them look like, some of the, maybe a little bit of the older ones, but there's usually a central area where everyone's sitting. There's a stove in the middle that heats up the area. This is generally the only area that you have heat. So what happens in case of emergency? So different from other locations, if there's an emergency on the trek to Everest Base Camp, we call helicopters. So that's why it's very important to have insurance that would cover that helicopter flight. That flight can take you back to Lukla or take you to Kathmandu. So generally, if people start getting altitude sickness here, if it starts getting really bad, this is the smartest way to get people down off of the area or off of the trek. So how much does it cost? Generally speaking, a trek to Everest Base Camp, depending upon what kind of company it is, would run anywhere from $2,500 to $4,500 per person. Depends upon if it includes your flights up there. It depends upon the number of guides, the number of porters, is water and tea and food included. All of that kind of contributes to a price in terms of what it costs. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. Generally speaking, Embark is around $3,000. And it again includes domestic flights and other pieces, hotels on the front end in Kathmandu as well, permits and quality guides. Here's a group that made their way up there. Again, this was a group that was raising money for multiple myeloma, but you can see matching coats and everything like that. Great picture. Absolutely love this shot. Here's actually a trip from just a few weeks ago, different kind of version of the adventure. If you look in the back left-hand side, you can see a bunch of the people. This is April on Everest Base Camp, so you can see people preparing and acclimatizing for their adventure before they hike up to Camp 1. Another shot from a group. One of the things about trekking Everest Base Camp is you generally can't see Everest too well. So most of the time, people go up to Kalapatar, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. But the trek from Gorkshep up to Everest Base Camp and back is going to run you an additional 5 hours. A lot of time it's from that same day that you hiked up from Loboshe. So it can be a very, very long day. We kind of gauge the weather, decide which day we're going to do it, because one day we're going to hike up there and the other day we're going to do Kalapatar, which is the high point where you can see everything. I know I showed this shot earlier, but again, a great kind of view of the area. And now, oops, let me jump back here. So here's actually what Everest Base Camp looks like. This is, again, just from a few weeks ago. You can see the Khumbu icefall. And as you can see, Everest Base Camp is not one specific area. It's stretched out over a very, very large area. And again, these are all the people waiting for a good weather window, acclimatizing before they make their trek up to the first camp. This is a really, really important picture, I think. So this is Gorkshep, the final village before you go to Everest Base Camp. But as you can see, this kind of dirt trail making its way up the mountain, that's Kalapatar. That's over 18,000 feet at the top of that brown dirt hill. But it's the absolute best way to look at Everest. Now, if you notice that that's 18,000 feet, look at that mountain behind it. Absolutely incredibly high. So tons of huge 20,000 foot peaks, more than way more than 20,000 foot peaks exist in this area. So I absolutely Love this trek because once you get up to this high point right here, which I think is the biggest reward on the trek, you get to look back at everything, including Mount Everest in the back left-hand corner there. So the top of Kalapatar, over 18,500 feet. This is where you come to hang your prayer flags. There's a group kind of looking back at them from making their way up there, usually in the morning when the sun rises. And here's a second shot. And this is probably the biggest takeaway that I want anyone to get from this conversation is this is a woman who just made it to Kalapatar. And so listen closely. Hold on a second here. Listen closely.
That was the hardest physical thing I have ever done. Harder than Ironman, harder than marathons, harder than growing an 11-pound human in my marriage. That was horrible.
And where are we right now?
We're at Kalapatar, looking at the top of the world.
And there is Mount Everest.
So if there's a takeaway from that, you could hear what she said, which was basically that was the hardest thing that she's ever done, harder than Ironman, harder than the marathon, harder than giving birth to a baby. So anyway, it is hard. It's very, very hard. And again, you know, what I tell people is you have to bring the best version of yourself on this adventure, best version physically, best person mentally. All right. Everest versus Kilimanjaro. Lots of our trekkers have climbed one of the two and they want to debate which is harder and why. So I'm going to give you a little scoring system right here on my thoughts. Everest Base Camp is more than double the distance of Kilimanjaro. So that makes Everest harder. So 1 point, Everest Base Camp harder. Everest Base Camp, you sleep inside versus outside in Kilimanjaro. So I think Kilimanjaro harder, right? So 1 to 1. Everest Base Camp, you have 2 rest days. Kilimanjaro, you have 0. Okay, so Kilimanjaro harder. Okay, 2. From Everest Base Camp going down, it's still many peaks and valleys. Kili, it's straight down. So Everest Base Camp 2. So to me, it is tied. The summit, the hike from Barafu Camp up to the summit of Kilimanjaro is incredibly hard. That's that 14 to 16 hour summit day. However, trekking to Everest Base Camp, when you get up to Everest Base Camp, going back, it's only half time. You have to make your way all the way back. And so again, double the distance. So a lot more trekking. So, you know, different people weigh it differently in terms of what it is. But again, it ultimately is up to you. That it's different people think different ways of which is harder and why. All right. So 16-week training plan. You must be in the best physical shape to do this trek to Everest Base Camp. That said, lots of people that do this trek are in their 50s and 60s and sometimes even in their early 70s. So we've done everything in this area, but you have to train for 3 to 4 months to get ready for doing this. A lot of times people maybe do a half marathon or something a few weeks prior, but you have to do lots of cardio, lots of strength training and things like that to get preparing for it. So we have a copy of this if you'd like to see it. And again, kind of breaks down different things that you need to do to really, really take this seriously. There are other treks, there are some relatively non-technical summits in this area. That's me coming down this rope. This is Island Peak, over 20,000 feet. Another trek that you can do off the side of the Everest Base Camp called Njase. This is one of my favorite pictures, one of our guides' favorite good friends, Jim. As you can see, all of the mountains that are at the top of Island Peak. This is a few days away from the Everest Base Camp trek, so something to do. So, and again, here's Embark. Like I said, we've been doing this for a long time, lots of expeditions in the area. So again, if you have any questions about it, Donovan at embarkedexplorationco.com. Make sure to check out our YouTube page and subscribe. We do have a Nepal kind of playlist. Otherwise, look forward to hearing from you. Reach out if you'd like to see a copy of any of the things that I've done tonight. Otherwise, Hope to see you on the mountain.